So this is the traditional look at butterflies that we potentially will see during the next 2 days. But these are all the butterflies that occur here in this area that we do have a chance of seeing at this time of year. So starting off with the swallowtails, and I have to thank Dave Nunnally for this presentation as well, because in the limited time I had to put this together, I cribbed and used a lot of his slides from previous presentations, and even the graphics here are Dave's. So Clodius parnassian, not a true swallowtail, but 2 of parnassian species we have. We have, for sure, the other species, the mountain parnassian at the top of Mount Howard. In fact, there are large numbers, probably talking about abundance. I saw some fields this afternoon at the higher parts of Mount Howard, where you just see dots of white flying all over the place, and they weren't white butterflies, they were mountain parnassians. So you will see them tomorrow for sure. Clodius parnassian, not so sure. Did you see any Clodius?
No.
They're usually lower elevation, and maybe at the lower places on Sunday we might see them. The difference between the 2 species, they're very similar, as you can see. You look at the antennae, and the Clodius has a solid black antenna, and the mountain parnassian has black and white. So a very simple way of telling the 2 apart. The other slide in the middle there was mentioned the spragus, which is an ornament that the male attaches to the female after he's mated with her to make sure another male doesn't mate with her. Swallowtails, I didn't see any of these up there. No, didn't see the old world swallowtail.
Lower canyons.
Lower canyons, we might see them on Sunday perhaps. Oregon swallowtail, we should see them here. They're very similar to the following species, which is the Anise swallowtail. But one of the prime differences is looking at the abdomen, which is basically yellow with a black stripe, and it's reverse in the Anise swallowtail. And also the eye spots on the wing there, with the Anise swallowtail, the black spot is floating free in the middle. But Anise swallowtail, often at high elevations, I didn't see it at Mount Howard.
Did not see them hilltopping.
But they should be there. Maybe it's a bit late for them perhaps. But should be in there. Swallowtail. So Indra swallowtail. We probably too late to see Indra swallowtail, but I put this here because in the books it does say early August, Dana. So possibly, we can see an Indra swallowtail. You can differentiate them from a Anise swallowtail because the larger area of black, when they're flying, it looks like a black swallowtail basically. Western tiger swallowtails, yes, we will see them at the lower areas, didn't see them at the upper elevations, but certainly as we were getting on the tram today, we saw western tiger swallowtail. I think it was that, might have been the next species, but I think it was the western tiger. This is a 2-tailed tiger swallowtail, a slightly larger species, very similar species, but has 2 tails. The underside and there's the upper side. There, you compare the 2. There's usually more black on the western tiger swallowtail. When they're flying, you can see quite a lot of black. But with the 2-tailed swallowtail, it's mostly yellow, very large yellow swallowtail flying by. And certainly at lower elevations, we perhaps should see this species. Pale tiger swallowtail, I think I saw one today. You saw it at the top? Okay. High elevation too, so they can be at high elevation, also mid-elevation anyway. So the whites, the pine white, we're a little bit early for pine white. I haven't seen any yet. Have you done that in Oregon anyway?
Gary picked up pine white recently.
I've seen them here.
I've seen them here.
Summer Ridge maybe?
Okay, so they're just beginning their flight.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might see pine whites. Mount Howard is memorable to me for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is in 2010, I think it was, we were up at the top there, Mount Howard, and pine whites were coming down. They were drifting down from the sky like snowflakes, literally coming out of the sky. And it was one of the years where they had their mass eruptions of abundance in Oregon in the forests further south, and it appeared that they must have been, moved up by winds or upper air currents, and then were dropping down over the mountains. So that was a memorable experience to see pine whites dropping down. So the previous slide was the male, this is the female pine whites. They've got more orange and more markings on the underside. Becker's white, I guess I'm surprised to actually put this down. Well, we do have in some years a second brood of Becker's white that takes it through the summer, and that's certainly happening in Washington, central Washington at the moment. Not sure if we'll see them here, certainly not at the top of Mount Howard, I don't think, the lower elevations. Spring white, another one that will be at the end of its flight period, so I doubt we would see that as well. Western white we certainly will see. It's one of the commoner butterflies at the top of Mount Howard. They don't only occur at tops of mountains, but they seem to particularly like tops of mountains, and even the toppest bits of tops of mountains where they hilltop, and males will wait for females to come up there and mate them at the very top of the hill. We saw that today, a number of hilly tops. Cabbage white, not so much. At Mount Howard I saw one as we were driving here, just after dinner, before dinner, when we were looking for dinner, down a creek. Looked like a cabbage white to me, so ubiquitous butterfly, of course. This is more typical mountain white butterfly. Fills probably the ecological niche that a cabbage white would. The margin white, which is this summer brood, lacks any markings at all. It's sort of yellowish on the outside, but inside it's white, pure white. Orange tip again, that's a bit stretching. But at 10,000 feet, their spring emergence could still be operating. But a few weeks ago at the top of Mount Howard, the vegetation was still developing and just coming to bloom. But in the past 2 or 3 weeks, it's come to bloom and it's now going the other way and beginning to senesce, and it's drying out quite rapidly. So I'm glad we're going up there tomorrow and not in a week or 10 days' time, because the vegetation will be almost completely dry by then. So the mustards are probably, I did see a few mustards today, but they're beginning to senesce as well. Sulphurs, the orange sulphur alfalfa butterfly feeds on fields of alfalfa and can produce thousands of butterflies late in the summer in agricultural areas. So it's pretty much a lowland species, but will occur at high elevations too. So this is the clouded sulphur, which is very similar to the orange sulphur, but it doesn't have the orange on the inside of the wings, and so the slides aren't showing the inside of the wings. But the orange sulphur has a flash of orange on the forewings mostly, whereas the clouded sulphur is usually pure yellow. Sulphurs are generally a very difficult group to separate and identify to species, and they're very variable too, which doesn't help. But it's usually looking at the markings on the hind wing, looking at the spots and dots there, which tells you which species. And so you can see these two are very similar, and sometimes the orange sulphur doesn't have the orange as much or pronounced, and it can be difficult separating the two at times. But I saw flying in the distance where I thought might have been missed, but I wasn't able to catch one. I caught a warm pink-edged sulphur, which is an issue too, but I've seen pink-edged sulphurs up there more commonly than I haven't seen polypny at all. I had to go to Steens Mountain to find polypny. And I think of polypny here, yeah, so polypny sulphurs are a very rare species. It occurs only in the Wallowas and at Steens Mountain in this part of the world, so it's a rarity. Whereas the pink-edged sulphur is more widespread, particularly in northeast Washington, and you can find them quite commonly. As you can see, they don't have the other dots that the other sulphurs had in the earlier slides. That's one of the identifications. And certainly the sulphur I had today didn't have the other spots around the wing. So moving on to coppers. I heard a rumour that you saw these up there. I didn't see any today.
Yeah, they're very scarce, but I think we came across at least a male and a female over the last couple of days.
Okay. So they're very distinctive and quite large. They look like a blue, obviously, when they're flying. The way they fly and their size sort of gives them away as a copper. Once you get used to the flight patterns of coppers and blues, they're very, very attractive butterfly, obviously. So we may see a few of those. And then there's the purplish copper, which in previous times at Mount Howard is abundant. I didn't see any today. No, you didn't see any either. So that's the underside. Pretty butterfly, very common in most of the Pacific Northwest, so it's a surprise not to see it. It's usually a commonest copper. Lilac bordered copper, I didn't see any of these. Did you see any?
Maybe a male today.
Really? Okay. They should be up there. I've seen them up here on previous occasions at top of Mount Howard. Saw some a few weeks ago, Bean Creek Basin, and very low numbers again, so I think they're probably having a bad year, but hopefully we'll see one. Mariposa copper, it's usually common at the top of Mount Howard, but I didn't see any up there. I think Dave mentioned he'd seen one at the site we are going to perhaps on Sunday, so hopefully we'll see Mariposa copper during the weekend at some point. Edith's copper should be around, but I didn't see any of those today. They usually like high elevation areas, and this is well within their range. I don't recall seeing them at Mount Howard in previous times either, so...
David?
Yes?
David's got something.
We should see on Sunday.
We should see them Sunday. Good. I can't see you, it's sort of hidden behind. So that's the underside of the Edith's copper. This is the species we won't see, but if it did, you'd win something. You'd win the reputation of finding, being the third person perhaps to see an American copper in the Pacific Northwest. It's only known from the Wallowas, I think, is it? I mean,
Certainly from Oregon.
from
that's
Oregon,
it,
yeah. It's not in Washington, and it was found on Mount Howard. I haven't seen it. And it's a special butterfly to me because I grew up as a butterfly kid in England, as you can tell from my accent. And this was one of my favourite butterflies growing up. It was common in backyards and everywhere. It's small copper, it's called in England. And it's the same species.
So why don't we call it the British copper?
We could do it if you want, yeah. Change it to British copper. Hair streaks. I didn't see any hair streaks today, but I don't know if we're still going to go to Hurricane Creek on Sunday, perhaps not. It's another spot we may go to, which they've been reported from, and this is certainly the time they should be flying, and so it's always a nice species to find. Hedgerow hair streak. Same with thicket hair streak too, I think. No? Okay. So Western Pine Elf is probably the end of its flight period, more a spring butterfly, but high elevations it will occasionally still be flying at this point. I doubt we see that. I think you saw these, right? Gary, half-moon hair streak. Was that on Mount Howard?
Yes.
Okay. It's confused with Wallowa blue, especially when it's more marked. Gary mentioned the ones up there were almost immaculate, without any markings whatsoever, so just a greyish-brown butterfly. So that's Sylvan hair streak. There might be something for a slightly lower elevation. The ubiquitous grey hair streak, we should see that, and you did see that. At the top of Mount Howard?
Not on top of Mount Howard, but we've seen it regularly throughout the year.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, this is a butterfly that is having quite a good year. In my experience this year, it's turning up, well, it turns up in all places anyway, but in just the same numbers, if not slightly higher than normal. It's a survivor again. It can feed on, caterpillars can feed on just about any host plant, so it has a great advantage there of not being restricted to any particular food plant. It will feed on just about anything. So it should be common, and we should see it, and I'll be shocked if we don't have that in our tally by the end of the weekend. So moving on to the blues, western tail blue. I think I saw this today. I saw a Euphalotes species. And I'm not an expert on Euphalotes. Dave is. I may have kept it for you, Dave, to look at. And it certainly to me looked like it was darker than that, duskier, but it was very small and struck me as a Euphalotes columbiae or Columbia blue. Arrowhead blue, very nice blue. I haven't seen any so far this weekend. No. Silvery blue, they're still common in high elevation areas in the Cascades, but I didn't see any here today.
One yesterday.
One yesterday. Top of Mount Howard?
Yep.
Okay, it's more common this year than normal. So perhaps being a keeper during the winter was to its advantage. Melissa blue, more lowland species, not going to find that at the top of Mount Howard. Maybe Hurricane Creek.
There's either Melissa in northern and Hurricane Creek, and they're not this brightly marked, but they're, I'm not sure which they are.
So greenish blue, definitely I saw Mount Howard today. Just a few, not many. Butterflies blue, more common blue, up there for sure. Again, but not common. Like the other name is common blue. In good times you find lots of them mudding on wet soil. You get quite a spectacular picture. Get them in the right place at the right time. Lupin blue, I caught one of those on Mount Howard today. I know on Mount Howard there is a population of Acmon blues which are very similar to lupin blues, but the Acmon blues of Mount Howard are very different to the lupin blue that I caught today, which is very much like this one, quite large. And the Acmon blue that occurs at a much higher elevation. I'm not sure we'll go there tomorrow. I mean, if everyone's really keen, they can go there because it's quite a way up. And I think Dana and Gary had a look today and didn't actually see it anyway, did you?
Akron, no.
So I got this species, and I might give it to you, Dave, to actually confirm what it is, perhaps. To differentiate between these two species, it's come down to dissecting out the genitalia to actually be sure if you have an Acmon blue or a lupin blue. That's how difficult it is to tell them apart. But Dave has become an expert at dissecting genitalia in his retirement. But it's a skill that is very necessary if we're able to identify these species and separate them. And they're very confusing, turning up in different places, different times, totally different habitats. It's just a mess, really, of confusion as to what species you can have between these two in any different location. I selected these slides because they are very different from each other, and they sort of show the extreme for each species, perhaps, I think. So that, if I saw that in the field, I'd say, oh, it's an Acmon. It doesn't have the bold spots, but it's something, that's warm, whereas this one's fresh, so that's got a lot to do with it, which you can't, account. I mean, that doesn't, not part of the species identification. But you can see that the spots are bolder, everything's brighter and bigger. The butterfly's bigger too. I mean, they're small blues, but this one's larger than the other one. They're usually diminutive, very, very small. And this is very much like the Acmon, I think, blues that occur at Mount Howard, way up somewhere. And they're feeding on a buckwheat, which I think is it Eriogonum flavum, that's sort of a yellow flowered buckwheat in mountains.
What's the species?
Flavum. Northern blues, just like the sulphurs, can be very confusing. So we'll have a closer look tomorrow. Okay, moving on to one of my more favourite groups of butterflies, the fritillaries I call them, or you can call them, I can't say it, fritillaries, fritillaries. The great spangled fritillary, which is not at the top of Mount Howard, but maybe at the elevations we're going to on Sunday. And I know it's at Hurricane Creek, Dave told me. So hopefully we'll see this spectacular fritillary. It's one of the largest fritillaries, and the female in particular. The coloration there is pretty spectacular. The males are typical fritillary orange colour, but they're large, quite unmistakable. Coronis fritillary, I hesitated about putting this in, because looking at the distribution maps and things, it was right on the edge of occurring here, further to the south for sure, but it didn't seem to occur, well, it doesn't occur in the Blue Mountains, it didn't seem to occur in this part of the Wallowas, but I'm pretty sure I saw them today as worn individuals. I mean, I'm working on Coronis fritillary in the Cascades, and I'm very familiar with the way they wear in the summer, and that sort of developed an innate sense of identifying them, I guess. And so what I saw today, I pretty much bet were old Coronis fritillaries that are in the mountains. They're usually born in the shrub steppe or lower elevations, and then come up to the mountains for the summer. And the males follow the females up and get worn ragged looking for the females, and then they usually die before the females leave the mountains and go back down to low elevations to lay eggs in the autumn. I think Calippi fritillary is up there as well. I think Gary mentioned. Did you see?
Yeah, I want to say that the callippies that we tend to see here, I think, are much, a little bit paler and greener. And we were sort of assuming that a good portion of those worn butterflies that were very pale were callippies, but that's just a guess.
Okay. Well, but because it's so warm that it was hard to see the difference between Calippi and Coronis. Look at one of the differences anyway. The spots down there are mostly ovoid or circular, and with Calippi they tend to be stretched, all stretched out. So that really is the only difference, or the major difference, is slight coloration differences from overall coloration. Serene fritillary, definitely out there today. I saw a few serene fritillaries, one of the commonest fritillaries throughout the Pacific Northwest. Hydaspes probably was the commonest fritillary at the top of Mount Howard. Quite distinctive from the other fritillaries because of the ground colour here. It's not a very good picture, but they're very purplish brown, and once you see them, it's easy to separate them from the other fritillaries. And my youngest daughter's calling them Hydaspes now, because their name is Daspy. It's a Hydaspes. Hydaspes. And this is one I really hope we'll see. I didn't see today, but I've seen it here before. In fact, this is, well, taxonomically, there's disagreement as to whether this fritillary actually exists as a species. A lot of taxonomists lump it with the following species, Hesperus fritillary. But other taxonomists, and I tend to follow John Pelham, not only because he's from Washington, but because he's written the catalogue of butterflies in North America that most people accept as the taxonomic basis of the butterflies that we have. And so, his word is usually the word that's accepted. And he believes that Atlantis is a separate species. And I've done some rearing work which suggests that it is as well, from the Mount Howard population. So I'm fairly confident that this is a separate species that occurs at Mount Howard. But the main feature about Atlantis, to me, is the amount of darkness, chocolate brown here, which I'll compare to Hesperus. The nearest one, because some people think it is the same as Hesperus, it obviously looks like Hesperus. So these are the two that you'll be looking at and trying to separate. And this one is up there, and I saw it today. And there's one location there, near that bowl where we were sitting at lunch, but down the hill to the north. They're down there. They always were down there. They still are down there. They're like a little enclave of them, only just flying down there. They are getting fairly warm, which makes things difficult. But they're not, as you can see, they're sort of brownish, lightish brown. They have this band here is usually fairly well developed, even more than this in a lot of individuals, whereas in Atlantis it's not. And look at this brown here, it's sort of lightish brown, and there's a lot of white blotches there. But comparing it to here, this band is there, but it's much thinner usually, and this is just a richer, darker colour all the way through. And I think it's the Mount Howard populations of everything actually tend to be darker because they're developing up in the mountains, and when you develop in the cold, you tend to put on more melanin or produce more melanin, which is dark material, and so the butterflies are often darker, and that's particularly the case, I think, with the Atlantis. Do you get silvered and unsilvered with Atlantis? I think so, yeah. With some species like Mormonia, Mormon fritillary, you get silvered and unsilvered, and I think these two might be the same. But I think most of them are unsilvered, certainly these two are. So yeah, these are both occurring together. So this is another reason why I believe they are separate species, because they are living together in the same location. I've reared them, and they produce different phenotypes when they emerge. You'd expect, if they were the same species, to have a mix. Or, if I read the Hesperus, I'd have some so-called Atlantis coming out of the progeny, and vice versa, but that doesn't happen. So I believe they're distinct entities, so I hope we get to see Atlantis tomorrow. The other characteristic thing I think about Atlantis is this black border on the upper side. Some of the other fertilities have, well, they all have a black border of some sort, but none of them have that extent of black border. And maybe it's a feature of Mount Howard with the melanism and the blackening, and that's exaggerated more than Atlantis in, say, northeast Washington. So I hope we see Atlantis, and we definitely will see Hesperus tomorrow. That's the Hesperus upper side. So you can see it doesn't have the same, it has a black border, but not the same as you had in Atlantis. It's got a lot of darkening here. And again, that's a function of being a mountain, developing, living, dwelling species throughout its whole life. And funnily enough, even the caterpillars are dark too, in this high elevation climate. Great Basin Fertility, I didn't see any of these today, but I gather you guys did see.
So I'm convinced that that's the common species that you find on the rocky, dry summit and a lot of the drier areas.
This one?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so take a look.
Yeah, I didn't catch one today. I mean, I didn't catch a lot of fertilities today,
Okay.
but
Yeah, it may not have been in the habitat.
right.
You were kind of focused on more of the mesic sites and yeah. But I think if you stick to the rocky ridge tops and the top of Mount Howard and any other little real dry rocky areas, you will find this.
Okay. So how, I mean, different subspecies from this species, how did the underside compare to
So I
that?
certainly don't have that amount of black here. Do you have a
Yeah,
sense?
they're pretty dark. I caught one today just uphill from where we were all down in the bowl. There's a overlook right there. There's a knob right behind it. It's rock, and they're flying all around that.
Yeah, you'll have fun trying to tease out what's what, but from what you're telling me, there's probably more going on than I was aware of, looking at things a little bit superficially, trying to, go broad with moths and butterflies and stuff.
Yeah. Well, Mount Howard is a great place for fertilities. I mean, there's 5-7 species there.
Wow.
And so it is a melting pot for fertilities. But usually Great Basin fertility has this sort of muddy, greeny sort of tinge, but when they're fresh. Great Basin fertility. So this is another fertility that you don't see in most of Washington. You have to come to the Blue Mountains or the Wallowas to see Great Basin Fritillaries. So this is something we should look out for tomorrow at the top of Mount Howard. This is common there, the Mormon fritillary. And it's slightly different from our Washington fritillary. It's actually a different subspecies called Erina, where the Washington one is called Washingtonia. And as I said before, we have a silvered version and an unsilvered version. And often there's a bit of greenish to it, so they're quite attractive and different. If you're familiar with Washington Mormon fritillaries, you'll see they are quite different. And you'll see they're common tomorrow at top of Mount Howard. And that's an unsilvered version, again with a bit of green there. So both occur up there, both versions. Western Meadow Fritillary, I didn't see any of those today. Might be a little bit late for them. They're one of the lesser fritillaries, so-called. The other ones are called greater fritillaries, it's a different tribe, genus, and they're generally larger. So these lesser fritillaries are generally smaller. It's the only one potentially we could see, but I think it's a bit late for that. Northern checker spot, I didn't see that today. Probably at lower elevations, perhaps. Maybe in between. Two generations? No, they don't. Single, yeah. So we should be fine, shouldn't it?
It's real early in the war.
Okay. So we'll definitely see these at top of Mount Howard. There's not many, just a few. Only females though, so maybe the males have finished and they're ending the generation. But we should see some of these. These are quite small field crescents. Milosa crescent is something probably not at the top of Mount Howard, more of a riparian area, lower elevation, probably Hurricane Creek if we went there. Dave? Yes? Okay. We might see one on Sunday. Northern crescent? No, I didn't see any of those. Not one of the crescents that's quite distinctive. Should be at the top of Mount Howard. Could be there. Snowgreen checker spot should be there too. I didn't see that. That would there's the climate. English checker spot should be here too. As I said, haven't seen any of these vigorous genus species of checker spots. So moving on to the true brushfoots. Commons, Polygonia. I did see a comma of some sort, an angle wing down by the tram, but I wasn't able to see what it was. It's fresh. So, these butterflies live a long time, and the new generation is just beginning to emerge in some locations. So, the hoary comma, the hoary sort of happening on the other side. We could meet any of those three, but they're just beginning to emerge, and they'd be very fresh and very easy to identify if we found them. But as I said, they are long-lived butterflies, and the last year's generation that was born at this time of year is still living in the Washington Cascades. So you've got a mixture of very old and very fresh. Not many very old, at the moment, not many very fresh either, but the fresh ones will soon become the dominant. But this is sort of the lull period. Actually, the one we saw was so dark, I thought for a minute it was Lawrence Langley. We saw it flying very quickly. I think Jasmine saw it. But it does occur here. It is in the Wallowas. And it also goes in the Blue Mountains, which is where this individual was derived from. So this is an angle we need to see. But again, it's the time when the old generation's died off and the new generation hasn't really emerged. California tortoiseshell, in some years when the migration is strong from California, it's common at Mount Howard. This year it's just seen ones and twos. They had boom and bust cycles, so we haven't had a boom cycle for 7 years probably. It's a long time since we've seen thousands of them, which sometimes we do. And if you go online and Google butterfly migrations or something similar, you'll find a number of videos taken by people climbing up Mount Adams and other volcanoes in the snow and being besieged by California tortoiseshells flying by, and we go, oh my God, look at all these butterflies flying around. Compton tortoiseshell does occur here, but it's a rare butterfly. Occurs in the Blue Mountains rarely. It's supposed to occur here. If we wanted to see this, we'd probably go to northeast Washington, where it's reliably seen. It'll be a great find if we found Compton tortoiseshell. I don't have another side of this tortoiseshell. It's a large orange butterfly. Morning cloak, again, it's another one of the species that's very long-lived. This new generation is just beginning, it's just emerged. Again, it's a butterfly that has boom and bust cycles, and a few years ago it was doing pretty well. Not so much now. Milbert's or fire-ring tortoiseshell, my preferred name for it. There, I saw a number of these up at Mount Howard today. Freshly emerged, another species that goes, it's a long-lived species, and new generations emerging about now, so they're fresh and feeding on the flowers. So we'll see them tomorrow. Painted lady, another species that's a migrant cosmopolitan butterfly found throughout the world. Can turn up anywhere, anytime. Didn't see any today. So it's possible to see these. American lady, another one that could turn up at any time.
And did yesterday at Mount Howard, a very tiny one.
Gary was telling me that, yeah. Okay, so this year they seem to be having a good migration, because 2 weeks ago I found one in Central Cascades on Bear Creek Mountain, which is the first one I've ever seen in Washington. For the book that Dave and I wrote, I had to go to Northern California, and Jasmine was the person that found one female American lady so that we could breed this butterfly for our book. West Coast lady is in the same bag, where they migrate up from California, and some years they're quite common, often in the Blue Mountains and the Wallowas, but I hadn't seen one this year so far. Gary's seen one, you've seen. Okay, so it's possible to see a West Coast lady, and I hope we really do, because my youngest daughter, Annabella, I wonder where she got that name from. And her middle name is Vanessa, so she's Annabella Vanessa, and she'd really like to see the butterfly she's named after. Yes, John?
I saw one of these on Mount Spokane Summit
Recently?
about a month ago,
Okay.
and it was really odd because I had not seen a single painted lady, regular painted lady this year yet.
David, I saw them 2 weeks ago in the Elkhorns over at Baker City.
Okay.
They were there, and they were pretty fresh.
Oh, really? Okay, so we could see them. Normally, this is the time of year when you begin to see them, in numbers. So hopefully, we will see them. We'll definitely see red admirals. We saw these today. Gary and I did as well. I think they were flying around the tram, weren't they? The tram shed at the top. We saw one lower down, or higher up, should I say. So red admiral, Vanessa Atalanta. North Queen's Admiral, certainly low elevations. We saw one before we got on the tram, so I bet on Sunday we see some as well. And they have a specialty feeding on animal feces. And there's a lot of coyote scat up at Mount Howard, and if we can moisten that, perhaps we can make it attractive for butterflies. I don't know how we might moisten it, but
Water.
yeah. Oh, the monarch, as you can see. I saw a monarch today, not at the top of Mount Howard, down below Wallowa Lake, driving to Mount Howard, crossing the road, I think, pretty much sure it was. And I think there's milkweed growing around Wallowa Lake, Lake Wallowa, whatever you call it. And I know people have found larvae there recently on milkweed around Lake Wallowa. So it's in the region. We could come across one at any time. I didn't bring my tags with me, unfortunately. My wife tells me I should bring my tags with me everywhere I go. The Satyrids, ringlet, one of the most common butterflies in the Pacific Northwest. I haven't seen one this weekend. Not at Mount Howard, no. It's not that common this year, actually. Did you see it?
They're down around the lake,
Down around the lake.
yeah, but I haven't seen them places will be doing similar.
So we should see
Behind the hotel is the.
behind the hotel. Okay, good. That's the sort of place they would like. Something just scrubby, a little bit of grass and a little bit of edge, and they'll be okay. They're a true survivor too, but their numbers seem to be down this year. Common wood nymph, made at lower elevations, not at the top of Mount Howard. Or wood nymph. No, they have this behaviour of going into sort of torpor or dormancy when it gets this time of year. They tend to not fly around too much, so they can be around, but just not very active. They're usually quite common. The commonest wood nymph we have. Great Basin wood nymph, it should occur in this area, but lower than butterfly rather than up the mountains. So possible to see that. But the one we will see at the top of Mount Howard, again, would vie for #1 position, the most common butterfly up there. It's the dark wood nymph, very common up there today. Skippers, didn't see any skippers, no skippers on Mount Howard.
So whatever that high elevation sort of western branded skipper thing, there's a few of those on the summit of Mount Howard and maybe another little high spot along the Mount Howard area. So they are around, they're real zippy and a little hard to spot, but they're around.
Okay, so that's the western branded skipper, right?
I believe so.
Certainly should see at lower elevations perhaps in some areas, but I haven't seen any spectacular skipper if we see these. Dusky wings, Perseus dusky wing, little black skipper. Gary, you've seen one? Where?
No, I haven't.
Mount Howard, okay. Alright, so there are some skippers up there. I missed them today. Two-banded checkered skipper? No. Often seen on mountainside, so high elevations. And common checkered skipper, more low elevation, more weedy type of butterfly, feeds on weeds, it's a caterpillar. But the sort of butterfly you probably find around the hotel, like the ring. And same with the sooty wing too, which used to be much commoner than it seems to be these days. Feeds on weeds, usually in waste areas, so low elevation perhaps, but it occurs here and this is the time to see it. We'll be lucky to see one of these, I think. And the grass skippers, Juba skipper, possible to see that, but it's usually spring and autumn flying, and but at high elevation, some individuals could still be flying, but didn't see any. But this is the western branded skipper that Dana was mentioning, a subspecies of this that is at the top of Mount Howard. So they're very similar, Juba and western branded skipper, but usually at this time of year it will be the western branded skipper flying.
And just David, true to form, it seems like some of those high elevation western branded skippers are less heavily marked.
Okay. Peg skipper, I was surprised to see that does occur here. So is Dave, apparently, but I have never seen it here. It's more a northeastern Washington butterfly, in my opinion. But sandhill skipper, also possible to see, but I haven't seen it. Sonoran skipper, another one. So a lot of these skippers are very similar, but I don't think we're going to see many skippers at all. Woodland skipper, we could see woodland, so they're beginning to emerge, or have been emerging for a couple of weeks now. So we're quite likely to see these, not at the top of Mount Howard, but lower elevations. Very common from now until October. Huge populations usually. It'd be interesting to see if their populations are as huge this year as they normally are. See if they suffered any. Maybe not, because they weren't flying when the heat wave occurred, so it'd be interesting to see. Finally, the common roadside skipper, which if we walk along the road, maybe we'll find. I haven't seen one. And that's the 89th species that we could possibly see. So there's the smallest horde of butterflies